Welcome to Storytime with Dave Booker. We're appreciate you being here. Appreciate you coming back and listening in to more of Sensitive Tyranny. Today we've done the prologue, so today we're going to continue on with Chapter 1. And Chapter 1 is Obsidian. So let's get into the story now. We're finally there. Why did her Obsidian persist in this maddening game? Here sat in her dimly lit cottage, her eyes fixed on the door. For 2 long years, the enigmatic man had consumed her every waking thought. Her longing to behold his face grew with each passing moment. And, with the next day's full moon holding the power to separate them forever, an undeniable sense of urgency gripped her heart. The mere thought of losing him without ever gazing upon his countenance threatened to unravel her sanity. A familiar knock sounding at the door made her heart skip a beat. She got up, smoothing the wrinkles of her chiffon dress before making her way to the front door. As she opened it, a smile spread across her face. Obsidian stood before her, his tall, muscular body shrouded in an onyx cloak. Not a speck of his skin or hair was visible. The hyenas within her spoke in a cacophony of 7 voices. We say, pin him to the wall and yank down his hood. Eir ignored them as usual, biting her lip as she drank him in. His broad chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm. Despite the pouring rain, he was completely dry, as if the raindrops were avoiding him. Good evening, Diva, he said, his deep, velvety voice washing over her like a wave of warm honey. He cleared his throat. I missed you today. Mind if I spend time with you today? Eir chuckled, sidestepping to welcome him in. See, it's not that hard to express your feelings. Easy for you to say, he mumbled, walking inside. Unable to resist the temptation, Eir playfully tugged on his hood. Not hard enough to remove it, but just enough to earn herself a teasing growl in response. As she moved to close the door, her gaze was drawn to the rich mahogany sky, adorned with hundreds of colorful stars, shimmering with ethereal beauty. The Nair sun, which transformed into a black orb at night, radiated through a delicate ring of orange light. In perfect opposition hung the nearing full moon, its pale light shrouding the world in an eerie glow. A sense of unease gripped Eir's chest at the impending sorrow of 500 more families that month. Her people did not deserve living with the burden of constant worry and despair. When Eir was young and naive, she had dreamed of releasing Silas from the treaty designed to lead her people toward extinction. But that dream was a dead wish, and Eir wanted to live. Closing the door, Eir redirected her focus on Obsidian, who took small, measured steps, carefully placing his feet on the ground. But, despite his effort, she noticed a limp in his walk. Witnessing his discomfort was unsettling. As a blessed healer, Eir could mend injuries and treat diseases in a matter of minutes. On rare occasions, her magic fell short, like with Obsidian's knee problems. She wasn't sure if it was due to the way he'd been injured, which he refused to discuss, or if his own magic somehow interfered with hers. Eir also possessed the ability to take away his pain, but the arrogant man had always refused because of the brief discomfort it would cause her. So she decided to help him in a different way. She reached for his injured leg with her hair. The mint green strands moved with a life of their own, coiling around his knee like a brace. A slight head shake was Obsidian's only reaction as he continued his strides. Eir's hair adjusted and elongated to accommodate his movements, while ensuring her own mobility remained unhindered. They reached her small living room, where a fire crackled in the hearth. A worn couch covered with colorful cushions and a knitted blanket faced a wooden coffee table, adorned with a vase of fresh herbs and a bowl of fruit. A bookshelf overflowing with her favorite novels and healing manuals lined the opposite wall. Obsidian lowered himself on the couch, and Eir sat next to him, willing her hair to gently massage his legs. Are you taking your pain medicine? She asked. He scratched his head over the hood. Well, the vial broke again. She chuckled. You're supposed to hold it gently, not squeeze it. I tried, but as an explanation, he held up his large gloved hands. Erin used a few of her strands to retrieve a pain-relieving tonic from the kitchen counter. Here, drink this, she said, handing it to Obsidian. As he brought the vial under his hood to consume its contents, Erin made a mental note to buy him a metal container when she visited the bazaar in 3 days. 3 days. Ugly thoughts rolled in her mind, increasing the heaviness in her chest. What if by then he was no longer with her? Obsidian took her hands to his and brushing a finger along her knuckles. Thank you for taking care of me. Hers locks wrapped around his arm, sliding to caress his feverish skin. I can't stand the idea of you being in pain, she said, her voice thick with emotion. You know that, right? Obsidian squeezed her hands. This isn't about my knee, is it? Hare looked away. Obsidian traced the line of her jaw, coaxing her gaze back towards him. I've told you before, I'm undocumented, he said softly. There's no way my name would be included in the reaping. You need not worry about the full moon. Despite his continued assurances, her anxiety never fully subsided. Something happened. She blew out a breath and tried again. If something happens to you, I will shatter. He was quiet for a few beats and said, May I put you on my lap? Erin loved his distinct accent when pronouncing my. It almost sounded like may. And his choice of words was amusing at times. From the little background he'd shared, he'd spent years confined in a solitary cell. It is one of the reasons she connected so well with him. She was all too familiar with captivity and the scars it left on one's soul. You don't need permission to touch me, she said. I trust you. Trust did not come easily to her, but he had earned it. In fact, his was the only physical contact she felt comfortable with. But this is level 2, he said. I don't want to startle you. Given her traumatic past, Obsidian had established a hierarchy of physical contact with her. Holding her hand or giving her a hug were considered level 1. Apparently, putting her on his lap was at a different level. Permission happily granted, Erin said with a chuckle. Obsidian inched closer until their thighs kissed, then smoothly raised her by the waist and settled her onto his lap. Despite her tall and well-built stature from 2 years of training, he effortlessly supported her weight. Erin nestled closer to his warmth, inhaling his scent of leather and teakwood. In his embrace, she felt safe, content. Cheek pressed against his chest, she listened to his heartbeats that sounded so much like diva, diva, diva. Obsidian held her for long moments, caressing her hair. His touch always made the strands shudder in pleasure. I brought you something, he said, manifesting a carafe out of thin air and setting it on the table. Smile graced Erin's lips. You didn't forget! She had once mentioned that she loved tea. Since then, Obsidian always showed up to her house with a carafe. What flavor did you make tonight? She asked, climbing off his lap and placing 2 cups in front of him from the lower level of the coffee table. Black tea with lemon and ginger, he said, pouring her some. He handed her the drink with fingers that were almost 1.5 times longer than that of a normal person. Not that it bothered her. She'd grown used to some of his differences. It's what you like on a rainy day, isn't it? Erin hummed, savoring the aroma as she took a sip. There was a hint of sweetness, just as she liked. Thank you. Obsidian sipped his own tea, appearing to enjoy it. Only she could see his expression. What if something happened to him before her wish came true? Her memories of him would be forever shrouded in a dark cloak. A gloved hand rested over hers, making her look up. What is it? Eric exhaled. When? Obsidian surely knew what she meant because they just had this conversation many times. It always ended with him asking for more time. She didn't expect anything different this time, but she pressed on. Listen, I don't care about your looks. It's your heart that matters. The only thing that would have made a difference was if he were accursed, but she had already asked him about that. He had denied being one, and she would have known if he were lying. The cursed were soulless, selfish creatures who only knew how to take. But Obsidian had always been on the giving end. He was even aware of Ain's and had accepted her despite them. Obsidian was quiet for a moment, tapping his fingers on the armrest. And then he said, I apologize for keeping you waiting for so long. I was just... He exhaled. It doesn't matter anymore. Tomorrow, you'll see me and learn my real name. Erin held her breath, fearing she hadn't heard him right. 2 years of waiting and fantasizing about his smile. His eyes, she could wait no longer, fearing he would change his mind the next day. Why not tonight? A low laugh escaped him. I'd like to ensure I'm well groomed before you see me for the first time. Bear chuckled, raising a hand to caress his jaw. The fabric of his hood remained a barrier between them. Only one more day. I don't have to wait until tomorrow to give you something, she said, sending her braid to the bookshelf to retrieve a bracelet she knitted. She used black yarn but woven in golden strands to add some color to his attire. He took the bracelet, turning it around to study its intricate patterns. It's beautiful. He put it on over his sleeve and leaned forward to kiss her brow. Thank you. He stopped, shaking his head. Never mind. For the first time that night, Erin noticed how tense he was. His body was rigid, his hands clenched. Are you well? She asked. I don't know. Is it because of tomorrow? She hoped she hadn't pressured him into doing something he didn't want. We say, if needs be with us, it is our right to see him. He shook his head. No, not at all. I've been wanting to reveal myself to you for a while. Well, what is it? It doesn't matter. What matters is that we're together tonight. Obsidian grew quiet for several heartbeats. It happened often. He'd grow as still as a statue, and even his chest ceased to rise and fall in that state. It was as though his body was there while his soul wandered elsewhere. And he would remain like that until he heard a loud noise or was touched. Bear reached for her shoulder, gently caressing it. As always, he jumped suddenly, then touched her face, as if reassuring himself that she was real. Only this time the touch lingered, as if he was trying to commit the feel of her to memory. He traced her cheek with a finger, then moved down to her lips. You are magnificent, he said, his voice hoarse. Erin loved his distinct accent. The words, along with the feather-like brush against her lips, awakened Erin's unspoken desires. Her breathing became shallow and tension arose within her. Obsidian brought her concealed face closer, and Erin leaned forward in response, resting a hand over his thundering heart. The touch must have sobered him because he pulled back, putting distance between them. Erin remained frozen in place, unable to ignore the sharp pang of rejection. Obsidian might not want a relationship with her, but why did he make her feel so special then? Because he feels sorry for a lonely, barren widow. She crossed her arms over her belly, feeling the void within. I know I don't deserve you, she whispered, blinking back her tears. No, Obsidian shook his head. That's not what I... He sighed and pulled her closer, resting her forehead against hers. She could feel the heat of his gaze as he said, make no mistake that I have desired you for a long time. His words decreased the ache in her chest. I'd like you to see me before our first kiss, though. He added, I don't want you to regret it. That would break me. Do you understand? Erin wanted to argue that she would never regret kissing him, but she would prove it instead. Tomorrow. One more day, and then you can kiss me wherever you'd like. She bit her lip. Wherever? Obsidian ducked his head and toyed with the fabric of his cloak. Ear had seen him wield a sword like no Silesian warrior could, seen him sever limbs and kill ruthlessly. And yet her words could easily fluster him. Leaning forward, she kissed his cheek over the hood, earning a sharp intake of breath from him. She giggled. They spent the next few hours chatting about their day and laughing over trivial things. A yawn escaped her mouth, making her eyes water. Darkness. You're exhausted, Obsidian said, rising to his feet. Let's get you to bed, Madam Healer. Era appreciated that it never forced her into working less or limiting the number of patients she treated per day. He was the opposite of her late husband, who had controlled every aspect of her life, from what she wore to what she said or how she walked, and how much more. And much more. Her marriage to Holmes had ended the night she had shredded him into a pile of flesh. That was the first time that Aines had manifested. Her braid looped around Obsidian's waist and pulled him back to the couch. Stay, she said. Let me spend, the yawn stretched on, consuming her words. More time with you? Obsidian lifted her to his lap and wrapped his cloak around her. She nestled against his chest, savoring his warmth. It was her dream to spend the days healing those in need and the nights by her Obsidian's side, to cook for him, read with him, and lead a simple but peaceful life alongside the world's kindest and most caring gentleman. Obsidian caressed her hair, and she fought to stay awake. He said something about going somewhere, and all she could focus on was his soothing strokes. Her eyelids drooped, and soon she drifted into a peaceful sleep. The first thing Era felt when she woke up was the warmth cocooning her. She was resting atop Obsidian, who had a protective arm wrapped around her waist. His hood was slightly lifted to reveal the thick column of his neck. His skin was a beautiful shade of tan, so different from her pale white complexion. Her fingers twitched to remove the fabric and behold his face. We say, let's do it. He's asleep. If we take a peek, he won't know. She pulled the hood down over his chin and planted a kiss on his chest. A relationship was built on trust, and she wouldn't break it. Good morning, my diva. Obsidian's voice startled her. She looked up. When did you awake? I never slept. Of course, he couldn't, lying on the small couch with her own body nestled upon him. I'm so sorry, Air said, shifting. I didn't know when I fell asleep. He rested a finger over her lips. Shh. I enjoyed watching you sleep. Air's cheeks burned, and suddenly she was aware of how close they were. Their bodies were pressed together, their chests rising and falling in unison. Before giving in to her carnal desires, Air sat up, untangled herself from him. Her tresses coiled around his arms, and she tore them away, willing them into a braid. Obsidian chuckled. I must get going, he said, adjusting his cloak as he got up. Air accompanied him to the door, where he halted, taking her hands into his. Today, before sunset. Don't be late. I won't, Air said, leaning forward to kiss his broad chest and inhale his scent. He kissed her forehead before turning to leave. Good day. Air stood just outside her cottage, arms wrapped around herself against the morning chill. The near sun bathed the surroundings in a soft orange light, illuminating the coral grass, leading from her doorstep toward the forest that separated her dwelling from Obsidian's. A strange sensation filled her chest as she watched Obsidian striding away, as if their hearts were joined with a string and With each step he took, the string pulled. We say don't let him leave. Air called after Obsidian, and he turned. Her braid rose, weaving its way to him. She followed. By the time she hugged him, her hair was already coiled around his waist. He returned the embrace. I love you. The words came out without any hesitation. She'd intended to say them after he'd removed his hood, so she could see his expression, but her heart told her to wait no longer. Obsidian drew a sharp breath, his hands tugging around her. Say that again. I love you, to the point that it hurts. Something warm dropped on her neck. She brought her hand under his hood and traced his cheek. They were rough with wet stubble and wet. You're crying, she said, her own eyes watering. It took him a moment to find his voice. I've waited a long time to hear those words from you. He brought her hand to his lips and pressed a tender kiss upon it. I love you too, my diva, with all my imperfections. But it is my wish to love you so perfectly that none of my flaws would keep you from loving me back. Erin had never heard a word more beautiful. She smiled and leaned closer, wrapping her arms around his neck. You don't have to be perfect, Obsidian, she said, tears rolling down her eyes. I embrace every part of you just as you are. In the evening, air ran through the forest, separating her cottage from Obsidian's hut. The full moon shone with a bold glow, spilling his silvery light over the trees. She was so late, her patient's treatment had lasted longer than she had expected. Hopefully Obsidian wouldn't be upset. As the hut became visible, Air could barely contain her smile. She was going to see his face, learn his real name. Her hair danced around her in curls of mint. What color was his hair? His eyes? What letter did his name start with? So many questions, all of which would be answered today. His last words echoed in her mind. I love you too, my diva, with all my imperfections. She would love his flaws as much as she loved his strengths, for the combination was what made him, him. The door was ajar when she reached his home. He had probably left it open for her. She held her breath as she stepped inside, hoping to find Obsidian without his hood, smiling. Did he have dimples? Her own smile vanished at what she beheld. Mosalas. All right, that is chapter 7, or chapter 1, and we will read chapter 2 in 2 days, and that is the fall bean. So I look forward to continuing on. We've only got 4 chapters with which to do this, so I really regret that, but hope that you enjoy this so much that you will go out. I will put the link on the website so that you can get your own copy. It is out in ebook right now and will be out on the 1st in paperback form. So get your copy. It is a phenomenal story. Very glad that I'm being allowed to read it to you, and I look forward to seeing you on our next reading. So thank you very much for being here. Have a good day and be good to yourselves. Bye.